So on June 18th, Karen Reed was finally, after a multi-year saga, acquitted of a murder in Canton, Massachusetts. Is that right, Aiden?
Canton, Massachusetts is correct. Yep.
Canton, Massachusetts, and it was a case that captured international attention. Will be the subject of many. Has been the subject of documentaries. Will be the subject of movies and documentaries and books and so on. And one of the reporters, or maybe the reporter who helped bring it to national international attention, Aidan Carney, who known online as Dr. Turtleboy, is here on Breaking Points. We're very excited to be joined by Dr. Turtleboy, Aidan Carney. Aidan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, and so we want to talk a little bit about the case, but mostly I actually want to talk about your case because I think it's a fascinating, important, and overlooked case of press freedom. Because as a direct result of your coverage of this case, you have gone up against the same kind of system of law enforcement that you accused of corruptly mishandling at best the case of Karen Reed, and they have retaliated against you in an extraordinary way. You've already been behind bars as a result of it, and you continue to face down charges. But for people who don't know the case, let me try to give them a quick thumbnail sketch, and you can tell people the important parts that I'm missing. But essentially, Karen Reed was dating a police officer named John O'Keefe in Canton, Massachusetts. They go out to a bar, drinking with a whole bunch of other cops. There's one cop there who she's got some kind of a flirty text relationship with. She and John drive to an after party at one of the cops' houses who was at the bar with them. She just doesn't go into the house. He says he's going to go in. She tells him, go in, tell me if it's cool or not. She waits about, he goes in. Well, this is the debate. She waits about 10 minutes and she leaves. He is then found the next morning on the front lawn of the cop's house. The cops charge her with hitting him, knocking him into the ground, and then he dies of hypothermia overnight. They never go into the, they don't go into the officer's house.
Well, he didn't die of hypothermia, yeah. But
right. So, right. What am I? Is there any important piece I'm missing there? Because I don't want to spend too much time on the case itself. But tell us, what attracted your attention to it?
So what attracted my attention to it initially, it makes headlines when a police officer is killed. And that's kind of a story that I write about. So, I'm conservative, right? And so during the whole summer of 2020, I took the back the blue position, if you will, on that. And that's kind of like my bread and butter. And, when police officers are killed in the line of duty around here in Massachusetts, it's always the same theme. The profile of a cop killer is always the same. It's somebody who has a long and documented history of violence, arrests. You could have seen it coming a mile away, and they never should have been out roaming the streets in the first place. But when I saw a police officer was killed, I look into it and I see it's the girlfriend who did it. And I'm like, well, does she have a history of violence? Let's look into her. And I looked into her, and she's some, number cruncher at Fidelity, working as a financial analyst, and no history of violence whatsoever. And it appeared to all be a horrible accident. It sounded like I didn't look into it much. There was a blizzard that night, and I'm like, well, it sounded like there was a foot of snow, and she accidentally backed into him without realizing it after dropping him off. And wow, what a horrible, horrible way to die. The tragedy for everyone. So I really had little interest in the story because it just sounded like a horrible, sad tragedy that I wasn't that into. And so I honestly forgot the name Karen Reed, and she was indicted. And I didn't even pay attention to it because the original arrest gets a lot of attention, but not the indictment. I didn't even know what an indictment was until I was indicted. It's just, they just move your case to a more important courtroom where, you can face more years in jail. Essentially, that's what it means. And so I, forgot about it. And then in April of 2023, I saw a couple headlines about something about a Google search at 2:27, someone inside the house where John O'Keefe was found on the lawn of had Googled how long to die in cold at 2:27
Hmm.
a.m. and that this was suspicious. And I hadn't really taken in the full implication of what that meant. And so then I got, I put it on my to-do list of things to look into. I was busy that week. And then 5 days later, April 17th, I got a message from a Duxbury police officer, a retired Duxbury cop by the name of Brian Johnson, who generally has the same position with me on policing, back to blue, et cetera. And he tells me that, like, you need to look into this case. It appears as if this woman is being framed. John used to work with me at Duxbury Police. I actually trained him because John used to be a Duxbury police officer, a small town on the South Shore. And, he's like, something doesn't add up about this. And the homeowner is a Boston cop named Brian Albert, who has a notorious record as being a hothead, a boxer, a fighter. And he's not really well liked in Boston police. So, like, I think this woman has apparently been framed. So that means more to you coming from a police officer who's
Hmm.
telling you that, like, this woman appears to have been framed. And so I do a deep dive. I read Alan Jackson had filed a 94-page affidavit a couple days prior that explained all of this stuff. And it was like reading a movie script when you're reading this. Like, this can't be real. Like, this is crazy. Like, this doesn't happen in real life, something so brazen. And, I'm a receipts guy. I like evidence. I don't just take people at their word for it. And Alan Jackson had Cellbrite reports from Jennifer McCabe's cell phone, from John O'Keefe's cell phone, showing that he was going up and down 3 flights of stairs. Karen Reed doesn't have a flight of stairs in her Lexus, as nice as it is.
Hmm.
And so everything came back with data and evidence. And when it finally hits you, what happened here, you're like, holy cow, this is the story of the century. So I made a post on April 17th that I was, writing a story about what appears to be a Boston police officer who was killed inside the home of another Boston police officer, and a girlfriend was being framed for it. And a lot of people were commenting saying, like, is this the story out of Canton? Oh, I remember this. And so people were really anticipating it. I spent all night writing my story on this. I published it at like 3:30 a.m. And it kind of blew up. And I did a show about it, and it got a lot, my audience grew greatly as a result of my first coverage of this. And I really thought that it was going to be the end of it. I'm like, well, they have to drop the charges now, right? Like, it's quite obvious
Hmm.
this woman didn't do this and that somebody else did. And silly me, I was operating under the impression that our institutions actually wanted justice for people like
Hmm.
John O'Keefe, and were actually interested in finding who actually killed him. And I thought that anyone with a brain looking at this knows that she didn't do this. And these people over here quite clearly are suspicious, and at the very least, they should be looked into. But when they didn't, when they released a press release a couple of days after my first story, and they kind of put their pedal to the metal, and they're like, no, we're doubling down. Like, we're going harder at her now. That's when I realized that, oh, wow, this is much worse than I thought. It's the DA's office itself that is that is okay with this, and our institutions are okay with this. And so that's when, the harder they pushed, the harder I pushed back. And what kind of got me into hot water was, I say I wear 3 hats. I'm a journalist, I'm a satirist, and I'm an activist, right? When I'm a journalist, it's when I'm writing the stories and researching and doing all that stuff. When I'm a satirist, it's when I'm on my show and I'm cracking jokes and I'm being a little bit outrageous. When I'm an activist, it's when I'm showing up and I'm protesting and I'm
Hmm.
urging people to write letters and emails and stuff like that and become involved. And so I put on my activist hat, and I went up to, I said, Jennifer McCabe. I saw her at a John O'Keefe hearing on May 24th, about a month after I started writing it. And the woman who Googled how long to die in cold at 2:27 was there with her, her husband, and she's wearing a Justice for JJ button. And that just really offended me, because she Googled how long to die in cold in order
Hmm.
to decide how long it would take for John to die in the cold. And then she shows up wearing that button. So I just, I have a phone. I go outside and I start interviewing her, and I'm like, why are you wearing a Justice for JJ button when you helped, cover up his murder? Like, are you at all remorseful of that? Why did you delete all these phone calls? It's this thing called journalism that people used to do. You just
Hmm.
go up to people and you ask them questions. And at the end, they walked away. And that's when my wild side came out. I'm like, oh, these people are cop killers, ladies and gentlemen. They killed a
Hmm.
Boston police officer and they're getting away with it, and blah, 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 blah. So she went and tried to get a harassment prevention order on me after that. And the
Hmm.
judge told her, sorry, like, that's protected speech. He's allowed to do that. But she told the judge, that, is there anything you can do to get him to stop blogging about me? And I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty telling about things to come. Anything you can do. She's asking the government, can you do
Hmm.
something to silence this person's First Amendment rights? Because I don't like what they're doing to me. It's making me uncomfortable. I don't like him asking questions, etc. And the judge said, no, he has a First Amendment right to do it. So then about 2 weeks later, I knew that her daughter had a lacrosse game at a town called Billerica. And, I knew that she'd be there. And I'm like, well, this is a public event. I have a right to go there if I want to and ask her questions. So I went there, bought a ticket, and I went right up to her in the stands, and I had my camera out, and her husband was there, and he goes, "Hey, tough guy, how you been? Oh, you're a lot smaller in person," like kind of mocking me,
Hmm.
whatever. And so I go over to her and I'm like, "Jen, why did you Google how long to die in cold at 2:27 a.m.?" And she's laughing. She's like smiling about this. This is all like a big joke to her. I'm like, "Is this funny to you? Like a Boston police officer been killed and you're laughing about it?" And a scene is being caused. Security comes over from the school and they're like, "This is not here, not," and I'm okay. And I leave and I called her a cop killer on the way out and I left. And I have been indicted for felony witness intimidation for that, because Massachusetts has a really broad, to say the least, witness intimidation statute. Every state has
Hmm.
one, and they're necessary, obviously, because you can't have witnesses in cases who are afraid to testify out of fear of violence from mobs or gangsters or whoever, right? That's the traditional witness intimidation is supposed to be in spirit. But in Massachusetts, it's much broader, and it says that you can't cause physical violence to a witness or emotional harm, whatever that
Hmm.
means, which is the most subjective term ever. And so that's part one of the witness intimidation statute. Part two is you can't cause emotional harm with the intent to or reckless disregard for the fact that it may interfere or obstruct an ongoing court proceeding. And so they get all these people to go in front of the grand jury, Jennifer McCabe and many others, who I had done similar things with. And they all went in front of the grand jury and they testified that they were, sad, scared, fearful, not of physical harm, because I've never physically
Hmm.
threatened to, but they're just emotionally scarred from this all.
Right.
So that's part one they've covered of the statute. Part two is to obstruct in a criminal proceeding. And so the prosecutors would ask them these kind of leading questions at the grand jury where there's no judge, there's no defense. You just hear one side of this, and the bar for probable cause is very low. And they ask these witnesses, well, why did you, why do you think he's doing this? And they would all say, like it was a script. I think he is doing this because I am a witness in the Karen Reed case and he does not want me to testify. Like they all said the exact
Hmm.
same thing. And so it's just
Right.
very obvious that like they found this kind of statute and they're like, this is how we're going to get him. This is how we're going to shut him up. And so, I was doing this for like 6 months. I held a protest in Canton that was actually inspired by, like, we called it a rolling rally. We met in a Stop and Shop in Norwood, a neighboring town of Canton where Brian Albert lived. And we went to his new house in Norwood, and I announced we were coming ahead of time. So if they didn't want to be there, they didn't have to be there. And for 7 minutes, I stood outside of his residence with a megaphone and I just explained his involvement in the murder of John O'Keefe. I said he's the homeowner. He didn't come outside, blah blah blah, and then we left, and nothing happened. We went to the next house. We went to Michael Proctor's house next, then Jennifer McCabe's, then Julie Nagel's. It was a nice Sunday afternoon. Women, children, the elderly were there. There were no calls to the police, no disturbing the peace calls, anything like that. It was as peaceful a protest as you get. And honestly, what made me do something like that was, I had seen, I think it was a summer before, 2 summers before, when Roe versus Wade was overturned. A lot of people went outside the homes of Supreme Court justices like
That's right.
Justice Kavanaugh and others,
Hmm.
and they protested. And that was controversial because it's like, should they be allowed to do this? Should they not be allowed to do this? And ultimately, they were allowed to do it. And I
Hmm.
said, well, if you're allowed to do it to a Supreme Court justice, you're certainly allowed to do it to Brian Albert. And so,
Right.
and I didn't really have any goal. I wasn't trying to get them to change. I know they're not going to change their testimony or anything like that, but I just want to make my voice heard. Like I just have the
Hmm.
right, and so do others. And because I'm outraged about this, I take the position that John O'Keefe was murdered inside Brian Albert's house. and that these people are framing an innocent person. And that really upsets me. So I do the most American thing I can do. And I take to the streets and I peacefully protest. And I didn't threaten anyone. I've never hurt anyone. I haven't like caused a bruise. All I've done is hurt feelings. And so I was on October 11th. I dropped my kids. My kids' bus stop is like right across the street from our house. They were 6 and 8 at the time, and get them on the bus. And then I cross the street, and their bus stops at the next house, a couple houses away, and so they could definitely see this happening. A truck pulls up as I'm trying to go into my driveway, walk up the driveway, and a guy gets out, and he's got a vest on, and he's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Can I help you?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're under arrest. We got a bunch of warrants, and put your hands." And he starts putting me in cuffs, and I'm like, "What is happening? What is going on right now? What?" And then all of a sudden, 6 other unmarked cars pull up, and one of them pops out and starts reading my rights, and it's this guy named Brian Tully. And Brian Tully is the lead, the head detective lieutenant at the State Police Norfolk County unit. And so he's like the head honcho of the Karen Reed investigation. He signs all the paperwork, et cetera. So I'm like, I've been extremely critical of this guy and accused him of being involved in the cover up of John O'Keefe's murder. And so the guy that I'm accusing of being involved in the police cover up of a murder is now at my house arresting me for doing exactly what I did, accusing this guy of being nefarious, thus proving my point here. Like they're like the guy that's accusing them of cover up and having all this influence and getting people outraged about this. You're now at his house arresting him. They had a search warrant for my house, and which I thought was ironic because they didn't get a search warrant for Brian Albert's house.
For the house where the dead body was found out.
I jokingly say this, but it's absurd. I say I should have if I threw a dead cop on my yard, they would leave me alone because that's like kryptonite to the Massachusetts State Police. They will just leave you alone if there's a dead cop on the yard and blame someone else. And so,
I'm glad you. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just real quick. I'm glad you mentioned your conservative politics because it goes to the role of the importance of the principle of press freedom. Our viewers will know I'm not on the right, but your viewers, if they're watching this, may not know that. But press freedom should not just apply to your political allies, and also I think it's important to know that people need to understand that press freedom applies to everybody in the country. It is not limited just to journalists. Because think about that: if you had to limit it to journalists, then some government agency would then have to credential who's a journalist and would say, okay, well, you're a journalist and you're not. So you get First Amendment and you don't. So for people who would say, well, he's doing satire here, or he's an activist because he's got a bullhorn in front of this cop's house, and that actually doesn't matter. Like freedom of the press applies to all people who are here in the United States. And so it's not just whether you agree with someone or not. It's particularly important if you don't agree with them, you stand up for their press freedom rights. Most of the things that you talked about here are covered in this 45-minute roughly video that you have posted on your Twitter feed, which is it Dr. Turtleboy? What's your Twitter handle?
Yeah, at Dr. Turtleboy. So
people should go check that out. But I wanted to play just one little clip of it here, so people can get a flavor of the actual language that prosecutors have been using and compare that to the reality of what you were doing. So let's roll this clip here.
Actual video shows I was talking about returning to Canton to see a DPW worker who was giving me the runaround.
94, Turtleboy returns to Canton. This is a video posted shortly after Kearney visited homes and witnesses. This is not my last trip to Canton. I will be back. I'll be back. Get used to this. These people think I'm fucking around. You haven't seen the last of me. Get used to it at 119 mark.
They combined sentences from 2 different clips. I will be back was encouraging people not to be afraid of the McAlberts. This is not my last trip to Canton. I will be back. And more, I think people are getting, like a year or so ago, people didn't want to cooperate with the Karen Reed defense team because they're like, yeah, it's easy to keep my head down and whatever, and keep a low profile. But now, now they're like, fuck it. We've made people realize, like, you don't have nothing to be afraid of. The big bad monster's not going to bite you. We neutered their ass. They can't do anything. They're not so tough anymore, are they?
This is not my last trip to Canton. I will be back. I'll be back. Get used to this. These people think, pardon me, these people think I'm fucking around. You haven't seen the last of me. Get used to it. Get used to it at 119 mark.
These people think I'm fucking around. You haven't seen the last of me. Get used to it. Get used to it. But the Commonwealth makes it seem like I'm talking about harassing the McAlberts, which obviously sounds bad. But this was intentionally deceptive. I was actually referring to a DPW employee who was giving me the runaround. And I said that I would be back to get information on who plowed Fairview Road the night that John O'Keefe was killed.
I can leave the message, sir. Yep. I can leave a message and I'll get it to him.
Now watch this.
He's up the field right now.
Watch this. She goes, how do I spell the last name, sir? She had already written out my first name and spelt it correctly. She knows who I am. She didn't have to ask my first name. She didn't even have to ask what my last name was. She just asked how to spell it. She had already spelled my name. So she knows who I am at this point. People are messaging me now and they're saying that she is a friend. She lives in Tim Albert's neighborhood and she is best friends with the Weeks girls. That is the McCabe sisters. So this is what we're dealing with here. This is the home cooking. So I'll be back, Miss Boys Regular. I'll be back. You haven't seen the last of me because he never called. Walshy never called me today. Trotta never called me. If you think you're going to get rid of me that easily, you're badly mistaken. I will literally sit there all day. All day. We'll order Chinese. I'll make a day of it. I'll just sit there all freaking day because he's got to come back sometime. I'll be like, I've unfinished business. We didn't see Michael Morrissey today. I'll be back. Like, get used to this. Like, these people think I'm fucking around. Like, I'm Mr. Internet guy. Like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to write blogs all day. And it's okay. It's just writing blogs and just ignore them, whatever. No. I live an hour away. It's not, I got a Lexus now. It's not a problem. It's got great mileage and a good engine. I'll be there in an hour. No problem. Like, I'll get used to it.
So bring us up to speed on where these various cases are. So we just played this clip of this clerk who kind of blew you off and you said on your live stream, I'll be back because I need these documents, which is the essence of journalism. Like, if journalism was asking for a document and being blown off and then moving on, none of us would ever get to the bottom of anything. So you ask for the document, you're told, forget it. You're like, well, I'll be back for this document. Like, that's the essence of investigative journalism. Everything else that you were describing, asking people questions, having a hunch, like you believed X about this person, you're asking them about that. Like, this is the basics of journalism. So I know that you were recently acquitted of one set of charges. Talk about those, but then also, like, how did you wind up? I understand you did what, 60 days?
It is 60 days. That's right.
Behind bars.
Yep.
For your reporting on this case. So what was that for? And talk about the charges that you're still facing.
So I've had 6 of them. We had a motion to dismiss in March, and 6 of them ended up getting dismissed against the 2 cops, Buchanan and Proctor. They were both dismissed just because it's absolutely absurd that police officers have the audacity, who have guns and badges and all the power in the world, to say that they're intimidated by a journalist. I mean, it looks ridiculous. So I had 2 of those taken away. There was 3 conspiracy charges that were taken away because I had reported that Jennifer McCabe was at the Proctor's house. I posted a picture of her car parked outside there when the district attorney had said that she didn't know the Proctor family. And the way I was able to prove it was her car was I asked my followers, can somebody run a license plate for me and just kind of run it? I wanted to make sure it was her car. It looked like her car. I was pretty sure it was her car, but being a journalist and all, I want to double check. I don't want to defame anyone. So somebody volunteered to run a license plate for me, and they did. And they came back McCabe, and I said, okay, thank you. And I wrote a story about it, and they called that conspiracy to commit witness intimidation. And both the person who ran the license plate and me were charged with conspiracy to commit witness intimidation, 3 charges of it, which each carry 10 years in jail. So luckily those 3 were dismissed because they were just outrageous, but I still had I have 6 more felony witness intimidation charges, which are 10 years each, 4 picketing charges. And I have since picked up 2 more charges of witness intimidation, or what we call window intimidation. I was outside Chris Albert's pizza shop, and I didn't know that I was being audio recorded. And I had about 5 sangrias that night, and there was a camera in the window that was, obviously picking up what was happening outside. At least the video. You can't intercept audio in Massachusetts because it's a 2-party consent state. So I was with a buddy, and we started doing like an act. It was like a comedy act, and they called it witness intimidation. He wasn't there. and it was literally in front of an empty window. So I picked up 2 more charges for that. And then I also picked up the thing that sent me to jail. So on October 11th, I'm arrested for the first time, and they set bail. And if you are charged with a new crime while you're out on bail, you can have your bail revoked and go to jail without ever being convicted of a crime. And so it's very scary. You're just constantly on thin ice. And so I was seeing some woman, not even seeing her, like I was just in a sexual relationship with some woman who was a Free Karen Reed supporter who had just, kind of fangirled me. And I went along with it. I would go over there Fridays. It was nothing serious. Long story short, she turned out to be a psychopath. She pretended to be pregnant, pretended to have a couple abortions a couple times just to kind of mess with me. And I finally, after I realized there was no baby, I ended things with her. We have since gotten her phone extraction, and I've seen that on December 9th, she was so upset about this breakup or whatever that she contacted enemies, people who are dedicated to just destroying me, who got her in touch with Brian Tully from the state police and the special prosecutor, Ken Mello. And within days, she was speaking with them. And unbeknownst to me, Brian Tully and her, according to her phone data, kind of conspired to, he sent her a grand jury summons, a fake grand jury summons on December 22nd. We now know that there was no grand jury being held in regard to this. And he told her to send me the grand jury summons and say, we need to talk about this. And she did. And so on December 22nd, she sends it to me. And I'm like, how does Brian Tully know who you are? Like what is happening? And she kind of confessed to me that I was so mad, and I was mad at you, and I wanted to get back at you, and now it's gone too far, and now I have to testify, and I don't know what to do, and I need help, and I need a lawyer, and this and that. And I felt bad for her. And I'm like, okay, even though you've like betrayed me, I still feel bad for you, and I'd like to help you out, get you out of this jam. And against the advice of my attorney, I went to her house on December 23rd because she said she wanted to like show me all of her communications with the police and show how they were setting me up. And I thought this could help me, So I went to her, but I didn't want to go in her apartment. And she's got like a common area in her apartment building. So we met there for an hour or two. And unbeknownst to me, now that we have her phone data and we've seen the police report, she went into the bathroom in the common area and she called them, and she said that I have him here, and she kept her phone on, and she attempted to record our conversation in this common area, and they urged her to get him back. There's cameras in the common area, and so she can't lie about me in there. So they're like, get him back in your apartment. And so she had her son call her and say, Mom, come back. Her son was like 12 at the time. I need you to come back in here. She's like, okay, I have to go back in there. Could we just go in my apartment? And I said, sure. And the second I walked into her apartment, I was going to jail. Like, I now know that. And so she showed me everything in there. And then around 2 a.m., I'm like, I have to go home. It's Christmas Eve morning now. I have to leave. And she's like, you can't leave me. And I said, oh, I have to go home. It's Christmas Eve. And she then took the abortion pill in front of me, and she's like, now you can't leave. I'm going to be in pain and you can't leave me. I said, you're not pregnant. Stop it. And she was just using it as a way to keep me there. And then she woke up her 4 kids, who are 2, 3, 5, and 12, and start like 3 a.m. and starts taking their jackets out of the closet and said, if you leave, I'm taking my kids and I'm driving to your house in Holden, an hour away, and I'm going to bleed out in your driveway, and you can't leave me. You can't do this. And the 5-year-old comes out, and he looked horrified. And I'm now taping this. I tell her I'm taping this for my own safety because this is getting out of control. And I said, okay, I will put the boy back to bed, please. I'm going to sit here, and I don't want to endanger these kids. So I'm going to sit here and wait for her to fall asleep. So she falls asleep at 5 a.m. I leave. I'm so tired that I fall asleep behind the wheel of my car on the way home, and I crash on the highway. I'm woken up after crashing into a guardrail. Luckily, I'm able to make it home on Christmas Eve, but I'm all messed up from this. And I'm like, I'm on no sleep. And we go to my sister's house on Christmas Eve for like lunch. And then I get a call from the Holden police, and they say, We just visited your house. We have something for you. We need to give you. Unbeknownst to me, I'm tipped off an hour later by a Holden firefighter who says, don't go home. The police just came to your house with a warrant for your arrest. I said, what for? And they said, an assault and battery in Medfield. There's a warrant out for your arrest. And I'm like, oh my God, she said that I hit her. Holy shit. And, that's automatic arrest in Massachusetts. Like whenever there's a domestic violence, and basically whoever gets to the cops first gets to have the other person arrested, and no marks, no nothing like that. As it turns out, she has done this to 4 other men, including her father. She had her father arrested for assault and battery. This is what she does. She gets people arrested, then she gets orders on them, and then she has them arrested for violating the order. So I'm a fugitive on Christmas, and I make plans with my attorney on December 26th, which is my birthday, to we're going to go to the courthouse quietly, get in there and get out. That's the goal. No media, nothing. Just get in and get out. So we go to the courthouse at 9 a.m. on December 26th. Brian Tully's standing on the stairs of the courthouse with the Medfield police. They was waiting to arrest me when I go in there. So that's not an option. My lawyer says, go turn yourself into Medfield PD. I do. There's a big hubbubaloo. Media all comes down there. And, I am just kind of praying, like, please don't let my bail get revoked. We play the tape that I recorded of her, like threatening to take her kids, but there's no context to it. And quite frankly, it sounds like a woman in distress. At least that's how the judge must have taken it. Because he revokes my bail for 90 days. We later get that reduced to 60 because it turns out he's not allowed to do that. And I am shell shocked. I'm like literally in shock because here I am going to jail and no warning. Like I'm like, I've never, I'm a former high school teacher. I don't go to jail. And because I'm kind of a high profile person around here, they don't put me in general population, which is actually much worse because you're in isolation the whole time and there's no one to pass the time with. There's no one to play chess with, to have a conversation with. And I'm just in shock and I'm sad and I'm depressed. And, I do the 60 days. I develop a routine that kind of helps me get through it mentally, physically. And when I got out of jail,
in isolation the whole time,
we actually my lawyer had meetings with the jail guard asking, like, I said, I'd rather get the shit kicked out of me. Like if I get beat up, I get beat up. Like I'd rather do that than sit here all day. This is torture. Like this is, and I'm in medical.
Yeah. The UN calls it defines it as torture. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I'm sitting in the medical unit, which is where they send people who are having freakouts. There's a lot of people in jail who should be in mental institutions and they all send them to the medical unit and they're yelling and screaming all night and you can't sleep. One guy, I had just come into jail and he had swallowed a bunch of heroin packets beforehand. And I guess that's what they do. And they shit it out and that you can get high in jail that way. And so, but it comes up in the x-ray. And so they send him to medical and it was a CO's job to sit there outside of his cell and wait for him to take a shit. And that was his, worst job ever. But it smelled so bad in the whole unit. And like, that's where I was living for 60 days. It was literal hell. And so I got out of there on February 23rd. 3 days later, Karen Reed has a hearing. All right. And I go to that hearing because I never miss a Karen Reed hearing and it's my job and I'm back. And who shows up to the hearing with the Jennifer McCabe and Chris Albert, but Lindsay Gattani, the person that sent me to jail in the first place and lied. And she has never come to a hearing before. They have since befriended this woman while I was in jail and they know she has a restraining order on me because of the arrest. And they bring her like a toy. And I am forced to leave the courtroom, which I do because I can't be within 100 yards of her. I leave. I stand across the street where a police officer told me to go. And 10 minutes later, the hearing's over and everybody leaves. I didn't see her. She didn't see me. And a few hours later, she calls. She must have heard that I was still outside the courthouse at the registry of deeds across the street. So she calls the police and she says he was within 100 yards of me and he was yelling liar, liar at me, which is completely untrue. And there's video to prove this. And so I am charged once again, 3 days after getting out of jail with the misdemeanor of violating a restraining order. I had also been indicted since then with witness intimidation against her and wiretapping her for recording our conversation, which she said I didn't give her permission to do. And just like that, I'm facing another 120 days in jail this time. at a March 14th hearing. So I didn't really feel free at all. Luckily, the judge kind of saw through this one and didn't revoke my bail this time. But it was still very scary. And that's what I had the trial for a couple weeks ago, was violating the restraining order against her, and I was acquitted.
All right. So have you gone to, what about the original charges of assault and battery?
They dropped that the day I got out of jail. So they made it obvious that they had no intention whatsoever of pursuing this. They didn't believe her, and they were just using this as a way to have your bail revoked. I mean, I learned a lot about, I didn't know anything about bail revocation. I'm not a criminal, and I've never violated the law before. I mean, this is all very new territory to me. And that's one thing I've learned about this, is that there are a lot of people in jail, temporary, like 90-day stints, for bail revocations for crimes that they have never been convicted of, and probably will never get convicted of. And they just and some of them, while
it's a loophole,
well, yeah, some of them, while they're in jail for 90 days to get out earlier, will plea out to whatever misdemeanor. And it's like, that's how they get their stats. That's how they get their, their convictions or whatever, is they just throw you in jail for something you haven't been convicted of, and you want to get out. So you just like, whatever. Okay, I'll take a plea. What do I have to do? I have to do community service for 10 hours. Okay, whatever. Just get me out of here. And that's what they do. And so I think it's a huge problem. I think bail revocation in general seems unconstitutional, to put people in jail for crimes that they have never been convicted of, because you don't get that time back.
Right. So you went into this as a conservative, back the blue guy who'd been publicly oppositional to Black Lives Matter. I'm just curious, have you rethought some of your politics along the way, or do you have a different understanding of policing and law enforcement than you did when you went into this?
Yeah, I certainly I view police as just like any other line of work, potentially flawed. Like, people are people. I'm sure there's great cops, but I'm sure there's bad cops. I was a teacher. Like, there's a lot of great teachers, and then there's some teachers who mess around with students, right? Like, there's bad, like every possession, every profession has their bad apples. But yeah, I mean, I certainly think it's changed my, opinions on the accused. Like, I was this person who, like many, just viewed the person sitting in the defendant chair must have done something, because how else did they get there? Like, but now I know with Karen Reed and myself that actually anyone can be there. They could put it means not like being indicted or charged with a crime does not mean you're guilty of a crime. That is one big thing I've taken out of this. I always now will give the defendants the assumption of innocence in any crime. And it is up to the state to prove. They have the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did that. So I don't know if that's a political thing, because I do think that, kind of cuts all. There's people on the right and the left that, agree with me on this issue. And there's also people on the left that won't get on board with me with this, and people on the right who won't. Like, so for instance, like people like, Glenn Greenwald and Tucker Carlson, who, one is liberal and the other's conservative. But I think I find them interesting because they both are very big advocates for free speech and being able to say what you want, and just kind of against the weaponization of the government in order to, punish people who have spoken out.
So what's next for you? I saw some news that you're involved with a movie that's going to be produced. Can you talk a little bit about that? And also, what does your lawyer say about the likelihood of these charges like sticking and going forward?
Yeah. So with the charges, like I said, I'm facing 105 years in jail, and we're going to try to knock out like the Lindsay witness intimidation ones. We're going to file a motion to dismiss. I think we can win that one. Same with the window intimidation one. So hopefully I'm looking at 6 charges still of felony witness intimidation. So at that point, a number of things can happen. Worst case scenario is we bring it to trial. And that's a very scary prospect, because you're putting your faith in the hands of 12 strangers or a judge if you go bench trial. And so that's something we'd like to avoid if possible. And I'm kind of hoping that cooler heads will prevail in all this. And now that Karen Reed has been acquitted, that they'll take a step back and say, why don't we just end this Karen Reed saga? This has been embarrassing for us. We lost. He was kind of vindicated with the acquittal. And because if Karen Reed didn't do it, someone else did, and he's accusing these people of doing it. And so apparently 12 jurors believe that they did it. So, maybe it's best to take a step back. So that's one thing I'm hoping for. There's also a DA election coming up in 2026, and the people who are looking to primary, because it's a very liberal county, a Republican can't win that seat. So the only way he can be booted is if he's primaried. And one of the women running against him now is taking the kind of pro free speech, pro Karen Reed position. And so like maybe there will be political change that will save me. Who knows? But I can't count on that. So that's how we're dealing with those charges, but day by day. But as far as the movie goes, I signed a deal with Compelling Pictures, a production company out of Los Angeles, in last year, and they have the rights to my book, my movie, and the documentary, which we've been working on for several months now. And we got a lot of great footage during the week of Karen Reed's acquittal, and that should be coming out on 4 to 6 months. I don't know what streaming platform it will be on. But
it's a documentary.
Yeah, the documentary. I don't know. There's a competitor documentary that's kind of coming out with a company called Sandpaper Films. It's a British company, and they have a deal with Netflix. But they don't, I won't be in that documentary. I refuse to participate. They have kind of taken a Turtle Boy is the villain approach to their documentary. That's at least what I understand. So it's not going to be a very popular documentary because there's no market for Karen Reed is guilty. The vast majority of the public believes Karen Reed is innocent. So I think that because they're a British company, they don't really understand the vibe over here in Massachusetts, that actually the woman accused of murder is the protagonist in the story, and Turtle Boy is kind of the person jumping in and helping her. And so I don't think that's going to go well for them. But we're using the documentary to kind of build up the Hollywood movie. That's what they're big into. And he's talking to directors, screenwriters, actors, everybody's in the process of that. And he hopes that to have the doc out in 4 to 6 months and the movie within 18 months.
All right, last question for you. Where's Dr. Turtleboy come from? Where's that nickname?
Well, I ran out of, I've been kicked off of Twitter so many times that I ran out of handles. And I was honestly inspired to do it by Jill Biden. Like my slogan used to be, well, if Jill Biden's a doctor, then so am I. And so that's how it started. And I have since transformed that into, if Judd Welcher is a doctor, Judd Welcher was the guy, the crash reconstructionist for the Commonwealth, then so am I. But I kind of dig it. Like, it's cool being called doctor. Like, I get why people like being called doctor. It makes you feel important. I'm not actually a doctor. Like, if you're dying, don't call me. But I like the sound of it. So I just stuck with it.
Well, Doctor, thank you for joining us. I really, really appreciate this, and we'll continue to follow this story too.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show. Help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.